Hey guys, just a little preface before this starts. The other host and I wanted to try something new, and this will be a semi-recurring video you'll see pumped out, where basically one or more of us will interview someone and say we don't think it might not be able to fit into the show, or it's a bit too long and we want to give it its own time. So we'll pump out
We won't come down, and the sun can't stop us now. Watch it come true, it's taking over you.
Yeah, I can tell you what I'm watching personally, and I hope that this means a lot to you too.
Colossal, we come these renegades in the ring.
I do have a guest on this week. Unfortunately, he isn't too related to the Schmodown. It's very tangentially, but I'll be sure to explain why. But how about you introduce yourself first?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, James. My name is Paul. I'm from a podcast called The Countdown Movie and TV Reviews, and obviously I'm not American. Yeah, that's pretty much the very brief bio. We're showing us in Australia. It's been going for about 3.5 years, and that's how I've come to know you, James, through the show, and it's an honor to be here.
Yes, there's a term we use in the community called "I am a psycho fan." Just messaging them on Facebook, leaving comments on every video saying, "Why don't you talk about me more?" A very natural thing. And the reason I decided to have Paul on today was I actually found him through John Roca.
Mm.
Yes, he was on your top 10 movies of 2016 episode, a year and a half back now.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I have been a hardcore listener ever since. I've listened to most of your episodes. I think the only ones I've missed have been like the very early ones that aren't on the podcast app anymore.
That's right, yep.
Yes, and I have, as I said sort of jokingly earlier, fervently commenting and making sure my voice is heard.
It's a pleasure. It's great to hear from the fans. I'm sure you and your fellow team members on Call to Action would agree. There's nothing better than getting interaction with your fans, and especially when there's a bit of passion involved. And that's the great thing about film, that people really do get passionate about it.
Yes, and for those of you who are on the fence, one of the reasons I wanted to have Paul on is because I'm sorry to Ben and Drew, but they are my absolute favorite podcast. They mean so much to me. And I wanted to turn more people onto them. And if you
very much.
Yeah, and if you have anything have any qualms, just realize they're the Australian Ben and Drew, and they're a little bit more crazy. Take that as you will.
Yeah, well, I kind of think of us a little bit like, and it's weird how this happened because I went back and eventually did the math. So John and Matt Noe started the Top 10 show the same week we started the Countdown, so it was completely and utterly unrelated.
No
shit. Months of planning to get our act together and work out how the show was going to go. And of course, it's evolved in that time in 178 episodes. But yeah, so when the Top 10 show went on hiatus, out of the blue, I reached out to John Roca and said, "Hey, do you want to come on our show at some stage?" And to my eternal surprise, he said, "Yeah, why not? Let's give it a bash. I like talking top 10 films." And so yeah, we picked the best of the year, and he came on. He was a great guy, very, very kind and generous with his time, and it was a lot of fun to talk with. And that was certainly at that stage our most downloaded episode ever. So he brought a bunch of people like your good self with him.
Yes. And and since you guys don't take hiatuses, you're obviously better because you have more episodes out.
Not sure I'm going to go that far. We have our own sort of shtick. It's certainly not as knowledgeable as John and Matt's. There's a lot more shit giving, shall I say, between myself and my co-host, which is a bit more of what we kind of aim for. Be a bit more comedic, a little bit more, not to say their show isn't down to earth, because it is, but sort of a little bit more common based, if I can put it that way.
Yes, they are a little bit more knowledgeable because they think they at least know and have better taste, knowing that Chandler and Monica are a better couple than Ross and Rachel. Which,
that's a very recent reference.
I will fucking blow up tomorrow when the thread opens.
Fair enough. It's one of those topics that's going to get people's blood boiling, I'm sure.
It's no top 10 war films or anything, but it's going to be up there, I'm sure.
Good. The romantic ones are not my shtick, so I just go throw caution to the wind and let's see who we can incite into writing back.
Yes, I can tell, Mr. Scrubs. I haven't even seen the show, and I can tell it's a bad pick.
Yeah, we're losing listeners here. We're making some oblique references to our show. So
Yes, the most recent episode, top 10 TV open bracket romantic close bracket relationships. I
Yep.
think.
that's it.
Uh,
Perfect.
yes. Although I will say, if you guys check out any of them, I will point out their top 10 of the year lists are great. Their top 10, bottom 10, which I don't think I've seen other podcasts do, are always entertaining, mostly just to see what bullshit movie Wayne puts above his like Oscar-worthy number 9 or some shit.
Oh, you mean like top 10 last 10s? Yeah.
Yeah. And then one episode that I was heavily featured on, which I linked to all my friends, is the Infinity War review. And I believe you guys did top 10 superhero movies.
That seems right. I'd have to go back and have a look, to be honest. That was about 17 weeks ago. It's amazing how after about 30, you can't remember every single thing. Like, and I don't mean that in that sarcastic way. Like, I used to remember everything on my list. The first 50 episodes, I can tell you, oh, that was episode 36. Now it's like, I think about 165, 161.
I can't even back you up there. I'm on episode 17 and I can't remember anything I've said. Other than like laughing hysterically because I played some weird music in the middle of a segment and it was like midnight and I was incredibly night drunk.
Yeah, there you go.
But we are very much side questing here. For Paul on, I wanted to cover top 10 movies about movies.
Good topic. Very good topic.
I can't imagine why I picked that. It was at least like 2 or 3 months ago. Yeah, and I wanted to do it in the style of Paul's show. So you want to give him a rundown of how we do this?
Yeah, so basically we go from 10 to 1, obviously the 10th best all the way through to the best, and hence the countdown. And we go back and forth. So one of us does a 10, the other person does a 10. And then if we happen to pick one that's on the other person's list, we kind of acknowledge it, talk about it at the time, and then see how high it is on the other person's list when it comes around. And as you might imagine, therefore, imaginative cursing and on my show, the use of the soundboard to troll my co-host then ensues.
Shit, there's no soundboard.
So unfortunately, I'm in Site B. The soundboard lives through the mixer at Wayne's house. So yeah.
I'm surprised he hasn't broken it yet. Gone full. Okay, that needs to happen. You guys need to record like an Office Space style montage of destroying the soundboard. Please him.
Driving it out. Yep, that wouldn't be bad at all.
Right. Okay. So yes, since it is your show we're featuring, go ahead. You go ahead and start with your number 10.
All right. So my 10th best movie about a movie comes from the start of the millennium, year 2000, and is directed by a household name E. Elias Merge. It's Shadow of the Vampire, starring Willem Dafoe as Max Schreck, and John Malkovich as the director, who basically hires a real vampire to star in his 1922 film Nosferatu, which is a real clever meta reflection on what actually happened with the 1922 film Nosferatu starring Max Schreck.
That's great because I've never heard of this.
Oh, it's extremely obscure if you haven't seen Nosferatu, so it's kind of like required viewing to watch that film first. And I guess a lot of people in today's land, 98 years later, wouldn't have seen Nosferatu. But it's just extremely clever to take this idea of, okay, he was creepy as the guy who played Nosferatu in that movie. And so Willem Dafoe, who is a very interesting looking actor, can we put it that way? He's got so much character in his features, they make him look nothing like Willem Dafoe. And I reckon there's not many actors who would have taken a starring role in a film like this at that point in their career. And he just owns it. He is very, very creepy. That said, it's not a horror movie. It's more a satire, really, and it has a very, very dark comedy. So well recommended. Certainly not something that you're going to say is the best film ever made, but in terms of movies about movies, it's as quintessential on topic as you can get.
I'm only just now realizing how well thought and just how eloquent you are, and I'm realizing I have 0 notes. So I'm going to be going into this blind.
Right. Thank you. That's a great compliment. I don't often get a compliment from my co-host on my show, so I'm just going to take that and run with it.
That's because you've insulted him using the soundboard constantly.
That's true.
My number 10 is a documentary. It is the only documentary I have because, as I'm sure my listeners will hear, the more I talk about movies, they're hard for me to get into. But I had to include this not only because of the subject matter, but sort of as an ode to a figurehead who we lost recently, who I hope you're familiar with, John Schnepp. It's his documentary called The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened.
Oh, yes, I am familiar with John Schnepp, and I have not seen this, so please do tell.
Okay. For those of you who don't know, speaking indirectly at Paul here, Superman Lives was the Superman film planned to be directed by Tim Burton and starring Nicolas Cage, and just for some reason it didn't follow through. So Schnepp goes on a very long journey to find out not only what happened, but like basically he searched for concept art, behind the scenes pictures, anything he could get his hands on to put the puzzle together of why this seemingly insane movie never went through. And I'm sure you're familiar with the behind the scenes picture of Nicolas Cage in that very rubbery Superman suit with the long flowing piece of shit wig.
You mean that's not his natural hair? Damn.
I mean, if you've seen Ghost Rider, he can transform really easily. He can just turn into a very badly acted flaming skull. So he can do anything.
Hang on, I got to challenge you there. How do we know what a flaming skull would act like?
That's a good point. I haven't tried my pyrotechnic version of Hamlet yet. Holy fuck, am I a nerd?
Hey, that's why you do this show. That's why you speak to nerds. Nerds are our fan base. We can't denigrate that.
I get that I'm a film student, but I should at least, and I'm probably wearing a very out there nerd shirt as I'm editing this. I feel like I need to pull in the reins a bit. So take over with your number 9 pick.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm interested to see that film. So you've definitely raised it up my watch list. My number 9 is another obscure one, even further back in time to 1992, and it was a film that created a huge stir at the time it came out. It's a French film. It's called Man Bites Dog. Have you heard of it?
Yes. I pulled a list together probably a month and a half ago of movies I wanted to watch before we did this, so I could get classics in there, and I didn't watch any of them. So this was one of them.
Yeah, this is as dark a film as you're going to get from back in that era, and arguably it's out of its time. It's the first film I can think of where a documentary team follows around some character, and you're basically seeing the film from the documentary team's point of view. And in this case, they're following around a guy who is a serial killer. So this guy named Ben has come forward and allowed himself to be filmed as they literally follow him murdering everybody, from old people to young people. It's extremely confronting. It's shot in black and white, so the violence is stark, but not. It's more disturbing in terms of its nature rather than what's actually shown on screen. There's a lot of editing, which is quite skillfully done because it would otherwise be extremely graphic. And as the film progresses, the filmmakers or the journalists, the docu-journalists, become embroiled in his murders. They become not just complicit by filming, but then actually start to participate in murdering people. And as you can imagine, it all goes south fairly convincingly once that takes place. And obviously, it's a lot of comment on the nature of what we accept as viewers of violence and sort of stuff that gets covered in later films later on. But nobody really credits this movie with starting it all off. And I think it should. I wish I could speak French because then I can tell you what the French title is, but I'm just looking at it and not even going to try. But Man Bites Dog, if you're up for something dark and very niche and indie, give it a bash.
Well, good on you. I failed my freshman French 1 course, so I can... Never mind. That's way too long.
You get closer than I would, I'm sure.
I don't know.
I can't even tell you the director's names. Remy Belvaux.
Let's see here. No, Belvaux probably.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they're actually the directors and the writers are actually the journalist crew. So they've got a proper actor, if you will, playing the serial killer, and they are playing themselves. So it's got that meta level again.
Yeah. See, that seems really interesting, but I'm also really lazy, so I'll try to watch it eventually. Keyword eventually, because I've also been trying to watch There Will Be Blood for the better part of like 2 or 3 years now. I still can't finish it.
Well, it will take you about 2 or 3 years to finish, in my opinion. So there you go.
Thank you, someone who agrees with me. And I'm sure we'll see more of my list that I didn't end up watching later. And here is my incredibly contentious pick because it's sort of not about movies. Ooh. It is South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut.
Okay.
And,
please, James, explain yourself.
So the point of the movie, because Matt Stone and Trey Parker, much of their career, at least with South Park, is talking about social issues and trying to start a conversation about it. South Park's movie is about movie censorship and what parents and government figures do to take action and limit what the public can see. And this all wraps up along with other metaphors with racism and some weird undercurrent about the French Revolution. It has this deep and earnest conversation about movies, which at least produces three very memorable songs.
Songs that are memorable.
Oh yeah. I mean, you have shut your fucking face, Uncle Fucker. Kyle's mom is a big fat bitch, and Blame
Classic.
Canada, which I think won an Oscar.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, and again, my age will show with the kind of movies I have on here. But to me, I think it's interesting to have a movie about movies that isn't really about movies. It's talking about them very sub-narratively, and many of the criticisms you see lodged at South Park is, I would say, unfairly thrown at maybe the dumbness of their audience. But Parker and Stone worked their asses off to infiltrate their narrative with a lot of sort of subtle nuances talking about culture. And here, I think what they talked about in general with the censorship of film, television, and I believe it transcends to generalize like text media as well. Very fascinating and something that's at least worth studying, if only to get a laugh out of Saddam Hussein and the devil having a relationship.
Relations, yeah. Look, you talked around that very, very well. I'm still not sure I understood where the movie is, but I'm going to defer to you on your show and say, left field pick, well done.
I swear to God, that's like the worst one. That's why it's down that low. After this, it's going to be a bit more logical. And again, I don't have notes, and I haven't seen this movie for at least 2 years, so I definitely could have delivered a better argument.
I would take more umbrage in the high ground, if not for a pick that's coming up on my list. So I just have to be like,
oh,
okay.
Yes. I haven't done one of these live yet. This is going to be fun. Oh.
That said, my number 8, really good to move on.
Yep, go ahead.
My number 8 is, there is no contention about it. It is a movie about movies, and it's an extremely clever one which reinvented a franchise, sadly, only briefly. It's not, again, from the 90s, and again, showing my age. It's 1994's New Nightmare, as directed by Wes Craven. Seen this one?
You're going to realize this, but I don't do horror movies in the slightest.
Okay. In that case,
I'm also a baby.
I'll read to you then the byline. In this meta horror film, a demonic entity uses the fictional character of Freddy Krueger to enter the real world and torment Elm Street heroine Heather Langenkamp and her family. So, Nightmare on Elm Street was officially dead and buried. New Line had run it so far into the ground that the last entry into the franchise had been Freddy's Dead, which was one of the worst piece of shit fucking horror movies you'll ever see in your life. It was so, so bad, and traded purely on the gimmick of 3D, which was, the red and blue glasses 3D back in that time. So then Wes Craven returns to the series, and he basically, in the film, A, he plays himself, but B, it's the character Nancy from the very first film, Heather Langenkamp. She's come back for a sequel to Nightmare on Elm Street, but whilst they're making the sequel, this demonic entity starts to enter the real world via Freddy Krueger. So it's not really Freddy, but it's sort of Freddy, and it starts tormenting Heather and her family and killing off various people. So it's extremely clever compared to what came before it. And as far as a horror universe goes, it just sort of blew everyone's mind. Like, oh, there's a lot more to this sort of horror thing than most people would have thought. It probably could have been horror on my list, but I haven't seen it in long enough to be able to really pin it down and go, that was fantastic. I'm going to champion that to the end of time.
And didn't Wes Craven also do the same sort of meta idea with Scream 3, or is it Scream 4?
They are making a film of events in one of them. I couldn't tell you if it's Scream 3 or Scream 4.
And again, I literally haven't seen it, but I think Wes Craven is honestly really underrated in that department because, at least for my generation, it's always, oh, I love horror movies, and they scare me so much. And there's a lot of these, deeper horror films that people just look past, either for, say, artistic intent with, I can't think if you like them, I don't remember if you like them particularly, but say like It Follows or The Witch, or one of my favorites of all time, Under the Skin.
Haven't seen Under the Skin. Didn't like The Witch. Loved It Follows.
Right.
So,
But
yeah,
and then there's the whole idea that Wes Craven didn't even want to do horror movies. He wanted to do romance films, which is why he did Romancing the Stone, I believe.
do Romancing the Stone? No.
He did.
Sure.
Was that Ron Howard?
Romancing the Stone was like Robert Zemeckis.
Okay, I don't know. I'm gonna try and double task here, but yeah, Wes Craven went on record multiple times saying he wished he wasn't tied so thoroughly to the horror genre, and that's amazing to me that he did all of this so fantastically. I mean, secondhand still, but I mean, how much hard work he did.
There are very few bigger influences on modern day horror than Wes Craven. It's a tragedy that he passed, at a relatively tender age. So, yeah, look, I obviously can't recommend you go and see it because you're not a horror fan, and it's 7 entries deep, and you have to at least have seen the first one and the third one to appreciate number 7. But yeah, for your listeners who are into horror and maybe they are sort of more your age and missed all this, absolutely go back and check it out.
Yes. Wes Craven has done 2 romance movies. He's worked on Paris Je t'aime, or Je t'aime, I think, which is like a collaborative effort, and then one called Music of the Heart, starring Meryl Streep and Cloris Leachman.
That one does ring a bell. Okay, yep.
There
Never
we
seen
go.
it. I've heard of it.
It's okay. I've barely even heard of it. My number 8,
Pete.
yes, is my film friends like to call it sort of a gateway to the Cinebro lifestyle. It is Me and Earl and the Dying Girl.
Oh, well, this won't make much reference to or much sense to your listeners, but no.
Yes. I honestly would have put it higher in terms of personal enjoyment, but I felt like it wasn't as much about movies, and we're gonna see how about movies my top few picks are.
Okay.
Yeah, but to me, it was just a wonderful, wonderful little slice of life teen movie, and with I have an adoration for, I guess here it matters most about Wes Anderson, and something about an auteur style applied to romance really strikes a chord with me. And on top of that, I saw it relatively close to when I was really getting into movies about 3 years ago.
It's about right, 2015.
So all of those really fucking stupid jokes about I think A Man Walks Home at like 12:30, or Pooping Tom, just really juvenile jokes I found utterly just really stupidly hilarious. And then on top of that,
That's part of its charm, for sure.
yes. I know you didn't listen to the show, but I have a very passionate hate for Ready Player One, and
Ooh.
yes, Olivia Cook's performance in this is just astounding because I think it takes a lot to play someone so cold, and she did that also amazingly in Thoroughbreds earlier this year, which I'm not sure if you've seen.
Yeah, I have. Not a huge fan of that film. It didn't strike a chord for me, but people seem to love it. And geez, did I cop some hate on Twitter when I voiced their
Yeah,
response.
I agree with you, but I think Olivia Cook was still astounding in it.
Yeah, no, she's a great actor, and this film, if I can jump in, just
Go
sort of
ahead.
hit me right in the feels, and it's very rare that a film does that for me. I was on a long plane ride, and I sort of stuck it on as a film which I'd heard about, and like, how interesting can this be? And I was just captivated, and by the end of it was, yeah, a bit of a broken man, if I can say. It was really, really skillfully done, beautifully written, and wonderfully directed by a guy who doesn't get enough work on the big screen. He does a bit of TV work, Alfonso Gomez-Rejon. His movement of camera is just incredible. And like you said, not just Olivia Cook, but Thomas Mann and RJ Seiler as well there. And even the support cast, like the Connie Brittons and Nick Offermans and Molly Shannons and John Bernthals, they're all great. And this film is so, like, yeah, it is, you're right. It is not primarily about the movie making. That's more of what brings them all sort of together and winds them all into each other's lives to some extent, following on from the leukemia diagnosis. But the way it weaves throughout the film, and it is such an important part of the main character, I thought it absolutely qualified, and therefore I went with, when I ordered my list, the one that was most impactful on me.
Yes, and then I was gonna also point out, Nick Offerman, Molly Shannon, and John Bernthal nearly steal the show. They're fucking amazing, and at least personally, I watched this before I got into Parks and Rec, which you still need to watch.
Okay.
And Daredevil / The Punisher. And even then, this was early, so I didn't know Molly Shannon either. And seeing these A-game actors working in something so small and, like I said, at times juvenile, and they really classed the joint up with their just scene-stealing performances.
Yeah,
And I
it's
do
great.
want to. I do have a fun anecdote. I have a friend who we joke around and call her Heartless because she never cries in a movie.
Okay.
We were spending the weekend together, and I put it on for her, and it was the closest she ever came to crying watching a film.
Yep,
The
I can
ending
understand
fucked
that.
her up that deeply, and I can say I saw it twice in theaters, which is a very rare thing for me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. If you watch something twice in the theater, it must have had an impact. And yeah, I'm with your friend. I was sitting on a plane going, all right, I know I'm at high altitude. I know emotions are a little bit stronger up here, but just hold it together, man.
And you ended up flooding the plane.
Pretty much. Oh well, what a jump to go from that at number 8. I am fascinated. Boy, you got 7 films that are better about movies on your list. All right. Sorry, that was your 7, wasn't it?
8.
8. Okay, and my 7. Sorry, I went first. My 7 is Could Not Be Further from me and Earl and the Dying Girl. It is tonally, completely, and utterly the other way, but it is undoubtedly a movie about movies, and I don't care. I love this movie. It's one of the funniest movies I've ever seen, even though it is as juvenile as is humanly known to man. It's Kevin Smith's Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back.
Damn it! Oh, you're with my number 7. I thought we had the same one.
Okay, so you could, no, not quite. Look, no one else would have this on the list. When I Googled just sort of ideas about movies, no one mentioned this movie, which is appropriate but also a little sad because this is a love note to Kevin Smith's fans. This whole film is wall to wall in jokes based on all the other films in his Viewer Skew universe. If you haven't seen all of them and you didn't get into those films, you would positively loathe this movie. But as a fan of that universe and as a fan of Kevin Smith, I lapped this shit up when it came out in 2001. Did not stop laughing. I've watched it several times since, including for another podcast I was on probably only 4 or 5 months ago. Still laugh my way through it, even while recognizing that I am immature for doing so. It basically follows Jay and Silent Bob, who realize that movies being made about their alter egos or their comic book characters, Blunt Man and Chronic alter egos. And so they travel to Hollywood to basically stop the movie being made and stop the internet from talking shit about them, which is great. And because they never got paid. So it's pretty damn funny from there. It features everyone from Chris Rock to, of course, Mark Hamill in a pretty famous role, sending up himself in, or at least Darth Vader in Empire Strikes Back. There's a wall-to-wall cameos. It's just so much fun. That's why it's my number 7.
I do have to point out, though, plenty of people love this. For those of you who don't know, the Countdown has a listener community where a lot of us go and talk about not only our picks for their lists, but sort of reacting to their terrible choices. There's a lot of support for Jay and Silent Bob.
Yeah. There are a few people that love it, and I'm glad. I'm not alone, but I just sort of defend it because automatically, if I can use this term, film snobs jump down my throat when I mention this as being a really funny film. Oh, how could you?
Oh, trust me, I'm gonna get a hell of a lot worse for that.
So yeah, that's my 7.
Yeah. Okay, so my number 7, On the Road of Juvenile, and a very, very different pick from Mino and the Dying Girl. Something I know Wayne will absolutely love me for. My number 7 is Tropic Thunder.
Also on my list, just a little higher up.
Yes. Okay, great. This is a movie I've seen probably 3 or 4 times, which, again, I don't rewatch a lot of movies, so that's saying a lot. It just gets better every time because the more I learn about movies, the more jokes I find hidden in it. Every one of the cast gives 110%, not the least of which is Robert Downey Jr. and Tom Cruise. Holy shit, they're amazing.
They are.
And you're wrapping this very meta commentary about film, and even when you strip stuff aside, a really compelling war film. And granted, it is layered, or it is run through like layers and layers of Jack Black shit jokes and black jokes, and just a lot of other offensive jokes.
Yeah.
But see, that's something I really love. Like I got into with South Park earlier. These films on a face level, they appear very dumb and not very deep, and then you dig more into them, and realize how much they have to say and how much they're really going for, and they're really swinging for the fences a lot of the time.
Absolutely agree. I think this is one of the most hilarious films ever made, despite how offensive it is. And it's kind of a wonder it got made even in 2008 when we were becoming a bit more PC. But I don't, because of the way it's played, it's obviously just, to use Wayne's term, handled quite well by Ben Stiller in the directing chair. So Robert Downey Jr. donning blackface is not as offensive because they certainly calling him out for it throughout the film. Like saying, "What the fuck are you doing? You are not a black guy." And then he's a method actor and he's staying in character. So, and then to say nothing about Tom Cruise's cameo, which was such a well kept secret until the actual film dropped. I had no idea, and it was one of those like, it is, holy shit. Yeah, and just the comedy's funny. The pathos is actually pretty good by the end of the film, so it strikes a pretty great balance between being funny up front and then getting into the heart of a film later on. Yeah, I can't fault it. It's one of the better comedies going around.
Yes, and on top of that, it is endlessly quotable, as your soundboard knows very well. And I think like one of the more admirable aspects to it is that it carries a lot of different kinds of comedy, and there is obviously the many vulgar and baseline jokes we mentioned before, but then it also goes for the movie trailer style, just very long form jokes in the beginning. And I think one of the more interesting parts is how you talk about movies released now. People are like, "Is that real? I thought it was from Tropic Thunder." Because movie studios genuinely make these fucking idiotic ideas and put like millions of dollars behind it, and it looks about the same as something people would make up for jokes.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's in that idea of they're talking all about the movie industry, maybe more so than South Park, admittedly, but
which is why it's higher on your list.
Yeah, and again, and it's endlessly successful, and like you said, it's just fucking hilarious. It might deserve to be higher, hence your list. Yeah.
For me, it spoke to me more than some films, and so far both of us have missed some really big movies about movies. So I'm wondering if they came out in your list, but for the most part, they missed mine because I went with those ones, personal choices. That's what these top 10s always are. You could go with what you know is critically more well reviewed and most people seem to like. We could go with what speaks to you, and that's, if you're gonna do a personal list, that's what it needs to be all about.
And then back to you for number 6.
Yeah, my number 6 then, on that note, is one of the big ones that I think just about everybody would have on their list. It's pretty high, 6 on my list, but not any higher because I didn't love it the way that most people do. It's Paul Thomas Anderson's Boogie Nights from 1997.
Okay. And I've posted about this multiple times, and this is actually a very big point of contention for me. I would not count porn as film.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, yep, fair enough. I went straight with the strict definition of it. So if you were removing that from the list, we could. But it is a film about the porn industry. Yes, it is amazingly well put together. Mark Wahlberg's best performance. Burt Reynolds' best performance. In fact, you could probably just roll down the list of cast members and say best performance. Heather Graham has never been as good in a movie as she is in this.
I don't know, man. Have you seen Friends? Richard's a really great character.
Burt Reynolds?
Yeah.
I don't remember Burt Reynolds being that great in Friends.
Okay, as the role of Richard, he was great, and he shaved his mustache, so you knew he was really going for it.
The moment Burt Reynolds loses the mustache, he instantly gets cred. Fair enough. Yeah, look, this is a lot of comment about the time changing from the 70s into the 80s, all that kind of stuff as well. It's phenomenally, as I said, acted. I can't remember how many Oscars it won, but it was certainly in the running for a whole bunch of them. And it put Paul Thomas Anderson on the map in a way that he probably hadn't been up until that point. And here we are 20 years later, and everybody's still clamoring to work with him whenever he decides to make a movie. So yeah. I won't go into any more than that because I don't want to offend if it's the porn thing is a problem for you. So, yeah.
Oh, no, not for me. I just don't count it as a movie.
Okay.
Then again, I could just be a pretentious asshole. I do want to throw in there because I feel like you have a lot of very well thought out stuff today. I want to bring in my millennial point of view on it. I've never been a huge fan of Paul Thomas Anderson. I absolutely adore Punch Drunk Love, but like I said, oh my god, right?
I'm actually with you about Paul Thomas Anderson. He's well renowned and loved and revered in the industry, but this is his best film for me. Everything after this is way boring and not of interest to me. Even Magnolia, which had moments, but yeah, doesn't do much for me. So it's not just a millennial point of view; it can be an old person's point of view as well.
You think you're old? I mean, you're a little bit older than that, but you know. Um,
Nice, kind of you. I'll take that.
what was I gonna say? Right. Again, even as someone as myself who's not that big of a fan of the film, that big of the fan, whatever. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
I honestly referenced it way too much. Even today in the podcast group chats, I was talking about Marky Mark's Funky Bunch, and someone had to play Roller Girl for our group, and it's something about the film has like an indelible quality that is so hard to shake. And yes, it could be because of Mark Wahlberg's massive plastic cock. But I feel like there's something, excuse me for sounding pretentious, there's an oeuvre about the film that is so hard to ignore. And I do believe it's Paul Thomas Anderson. And it's either his first film or his first big film, really trying to make a voice for himself. And it shows.
Agree, 100%. That's all I got to say really about it. So, I mean, I think the film speaks for itself. If just about everyone who's seen it and just about everybody has an opinion on it, a strong one either way.
Yes, and as you can tell, many of my picks have been self-denigrating, and this one will not stop that train. My number 6 is the very white, very much loved and hated La La Land.
Oh, I didn't even think about La La Land.
What the fuck?
Totally should have, but then again, it's a musical and they just go straight by me. So,
Oh, we're gonna fix that. Yes, La La Land, which is one of the films I have seen the most times ever, up there with Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which is obviously one of the best films ever made. I honestly, my words are taken from me about it. There was, I can't remember who it was, but someone basically shared a video, and it was a compilation of all these people talking about how much La La Land changed their lives. Two people who I remember very clearly, or three, are Alicia Malone, Scott Mantz, and Dodie Clark, all of which were brought to tears, and it's one of their favorite movies ever, and I cannot disagree. It is a movie that I've gotten many debates about it myself. There's some flaws in it, but when you really cut down to it, the human spirit and the positivity in it, mixed with the reality of Hollywood and the struggles of getting a job in the industry, strikes such a chord with me, and it's hard to shake off. And on top of that, Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling in the third film together, their chemistry, I'd say it's more than real. I feel like it transcends it in such a way that I can't put into words. And again, as a major musical fan, it is just the music Damien Chazelle puts together after his magnificent work on La La Land, working with the same composer. Although I believe a lot of those tracks are basically lifted from actual jazz quartets bands.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I've heard it just in a coffee house somewhere, so I think it's more than just them composing all that original music.
It was as someone who doesn't like musicals, even I found something to enjoy in this movie, and it is partly that chemistry you've spoken about. It's Chazelle's camera work as well, which really did it for me. Particularly that opening scene on the LA freeway is just astounding how well put together that is. And the songs are catchy. My daughter, who's 5 and a bit years old, is totally into particularly what she calls the foot tap song, which is the first song on the soundtrack. And yeah, look, it's a good pick. If you were into musicals, it would totally be on my list. It wasn't offensive to me as a musical, which is probably the first time I can say that about a musical. Yeah, as you said, some people seem to hate it. I think it's pretentious, and I don't know. I don't understand the hate. If you are into musicals, isn't this just a perfect example of what they always were and what they have evolved to be?
I will point out that one of the bigger points of contention, and I can't exactly disagree with it. It's the one I've seen the most. Is that it's a film about jazz, and it's spoken from a white person's point of view.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I think that's what's the biggest part to me, a biggest standout to me, and point of its criticism. But I will point out that if you're talking about camera work, I don't know how to call it in the film, but the track that plays during it, Summer Montage / Madeline, is 1 second. If there's a behind the scenes video, which I love watching now and again, there is a scene where Gosling is playing the piano at a jazz club, and Emma Stone's Mia is dancing with everyone else, and I should have drinking so much soda before this. Like the camera pans are all natural, and you can see Giselle tapping the cinematographer's shoulder, panning him back and forth, nailing the shot every time.
Right. Okay. Nice.
He put so much fucking effort into it. And again, behind the scenes stuff, there are behind the scenes videos of the first song called
Another Day in the Sun.
Yes, I was say Under the Sun. Shit. Yeah, but Another Day in the Sun, and showing him meticulously tracking it, and all the dancers working their way through, and the bright neons and pastels brightening up I want to say the 101 overpass. I don't remember correctly. And then just that sort of joy inoculated in the very just terrible traffic and brownness and grayness of LA. That kind of contrast, I think, is what really makes the film not necessarily unique, because there's Umbrellas of Cherbourg, which I got into thanks to the film. But it really helps liven it up and give it a somewhat unique personality.
Yep. No, I agree. It's a good pick for this list. I'm not knocking it at all.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that means back to me for the top half of the lists. Now, I could have put 2 here. So you said you only had 1 documentary. I've ended up having 2, but I could have had 3. So I guess I'll save discussion for the other one briefly for the honorable mentions. But I've gone with a film, again, not that well known, but the newest film so far on my list. It's from 2014. It's called, here we go, hold on to your hats, Lost Soul, The Doomed Journey of Richard Stanley's Island of Dr. Moreau. Have you seen it?
I've heard of it.
It is phenomenal. If you want to see, so back in 1996, Richard Stanley was this British director who had made a bit of a mark with some indie sort of sci-fi horror films, including Dust Devil and Hardware. Hardware is one of my favorite films from the early 1990s. And he was given basically the keys to the kingdom to direct this huge remake of The Island of Dr. Moreau, starring, among others, Marlon Brando and Val Kilmer. And it was all it was going to be set and shot in far north Queensland here in Australia. And he rocked up, and within 4 days, he'd been fired from the set and replaced by John Frankenheimer. And basically how it all played out and what happened to Richard Stanley, including the fact that he basically went mental and just disappeared off into the jungle or the forest around where they were filming, and then would sneak back on set and disguise himself as an extra to see what was happening. It is crazy. Yeah, and they eventually track him down current day and what he's doing and the like, and sort of the most of the actors and how they were upset by this, and it was just all the stuff happening behind the scenes with the crew. It's an incredible fly on the wall of a big budget Hollywood film that went spectacularly wrong. So if you are at all a film fan, I heartily endorse going and checking this one out.
That seems like very much in broad strokes similar to my documentary pick. And granted, it's not, I would say, as interesting to a topic to me, but honestly, anything to learn more about Marlon Brando, and I have heard nothing but terrible things about that film.
This film will do nothing to change your mind. He was clearly just ego mountain and just did not care at all, and would just throw his not inconsiderate weight around at any opportunity that he could get.
If you want to talk about ego mountain, I think his work on the original 76 and later 78 Superman 2, he refused to leave his trailer, and
That's right.
He had to like sit, or no, it was Apocalypse Now, where he basically said, I refuse to learn my lines. You put a camera on me, wait like 2 hours until I say something slightly intelligible, and just use that.
And I think he turned up to Apocalypse Now like grossly overweight and just not at all in shape. And
that's why they had the film in darkness. And I think he was also very drunk as well.
Yeah, he's amazing just how far he did not give a fuck and destroyed careers and just upset people left and right, but got away with it because he's Marlon Brando.
Yeah, I mean, we see it a lot now with Day-Lewis isn't that bad. He does do some weird stuff, and then there's Jared Leto, of course.
Yeah, but Jared Leto's no Marlon Brando, and certainly he's he gets gigs, but he's not the Marlon Brando type. Whereas Daniel Day-Lewis pretty much only works with Paul Thomas Anderson now, doesn't he? And has now announced he's retired from acting, so we'll apparently never see him again.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, exactly.
So we move on to my number 5.
We are.
All right, I think this is my last truly contentious pick, although I feel like I may piss you off with it.
Okay.
It is the Best Picture winning film from 2011, The Artist.
Never seen it. So
Really?
I know this has its detractors. Yeah.
Oh,
Silent film, right?
For the most part, yes, there is one scene in sound which is actually, it's done fantastically well that I don't want to say too much about, but it really shocks you, and there's a sense of uncomfortability that the film tries to initiate in its characters, and by putting it into sound, it reflects that into the audience so well. But yes, for those of you who don't know, The Artist is a quote-unquote classic romance film about an actor and a young starlet who fall in love, and then he helps her get jobs, like another very similar movie, although not nearly as good. As we see with my picks of La La Land and Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, I am such a fucking softie for romance movies. Like, it's not even a joke. And something I can never do enough, or give enough praise for, is natural chemistry. And 1 second, as I pull up their names, Jean Dujardin and Bernice Bejo are just electric on screen. They really pull me into the old style. And you could take this film out of black and white, you could take it out of silent film, and those two just, like, I wouldn't call it naturalistic acting, but they just have a very human quality to them in their performance that I can't. It absolutely makes a film. I can't really understand why it won Best Picture over The Social Network, but or no, Social Network was 2010. Whatever the fuck was nominated in 2011.
I got no idea.
Okay, Warrior wasn't nominated, but it should have won because Warrior is amazing.
Warrior's awesome. Yep.
Yes, it is. But yes, I can't really talk about this much. The dog's really cute, and there's a dog in it, and it's trained. It's the cutest fucking thing in the world. I can't explain why. I think as the film goes on, it takes very sharp turns in narrative that you're sort of drawn into the style of, it is old classic Hollywood with text cards and these very typical leads, and it gets into like a very serious story and themes, and it really honestly elevates the film past the typical romance that I went in and was enjoying initially.
Okay, well, sounds better than I had given it credit for. I guess the idea of a silent film didn't do much for me in 2011. Now, as a more expansive viewer of films, maybe I should give it a shot.
Well, as someone who was championing Nosferatu earlier, hopefully it's a little tempting. And I think the biggest point of like the backlash was because AO won Best Picture over Warrior, because that's obviously the best movie that year. And just the fact that it's for the longest time it's just a romance film, and that's it.
Okay, all right. Well, we're going to bounce right back to you, James, so get ready, because my number 4 is Tropic Thunder. That's where I had it.
Right. All right, so here's my number 4, which I very heartily hope I get a low from. It is one of the best musicals ever.
You're not going to get a low.
God damn it. Okay. It is 1952 Singin' in the Rain.
Never seen it.
Motherfucker. Again, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. It is endlessly rewatchable. Gene Kelly and Debbie Reynolds are wonderful, wonderful leads. But the real scene stealer, and someone who I cannot imagine how they didn't get more work, is Donald O'Connor. He, I forget the character's name, but he is honestly such a unique and lovable character, the likes of which I haven't ever seen before or since. He carries just a natural bravado, and he lights up the room every time he's in it. And shit, one of his songs is called "Make 'Em Laugh," and I talk about 110%. He brings 5,000 fucking percent to everything he does.
Okay.
Okay, do you at least know the song number I'm referencing?
Nope.
He runs up walls and backflips. He wrestles a mannequin behind a couch, and he does all these just wonderful little, not even dance moves, but he's like, okay, so Looney Tunes. He's basically the Tasmanian devil. But instead of, eating and murdering things, he's just exuding joy and happiness. On top of that, it is old Hollywood, so you have this very just electric lifestyle to it, and it just breathes life into you. I don't care how sad you are, you go in watching that, and it is amazing. And that's not even counting one of the best villains in film ever, where it's just this woman who's, I'm a great actor, and she has that annoying, whiny, wants to make you throw her out the window kind of voice. It's honestly just perfect. I think other than one segment, which does turn into a bit of An American in Paris, where it's just a long stretch of just music and dance, I can't imagine changing the film in the slightest. It's a film that I think holds up till the end of time, and just sort of an anecdote, semi-anecdote, sort of show you what the kind of monumental impact this film can have. Do you know the podcast Film Spotting?
I've heard of it, but never listened to it.
Right, and these are, I think, two of the most knowledgeable people in film I've ever not met, but like listened to.
Yep.
And one of them, he has his daughter who is 7 or 8, I believe, and this is one of her favorite movies. And each time she watches it, she notices more and more and more of the technical aspects in the film, getting through just the wonderful music and the acting. I could honestly go on about this movie for ages. It is definitely one of the best movies ever. That when you guys redo the list, hopefully in 10 years, when you learn that musicals are fantastic, this will end up near the top.
Yeah, look, in the same way that you implied before that not being a horror fan, the chances of you watching something from before you were born being pretty slim in the horror genre, probably the same for me with musicals, unless somehow I had a renaissance of some description with regard to musicals.
And
just,
if you take anything away from,
imagine watching a 1952 musical and enjoying it.
If you take anything away from this, I'd say to watch it just for Donald O'Connor, because yes, he's a supporting actor, but because it is old Hollywood, and it's a movie about movies, and they're going back and sort of they're trying to figure out their way through the transition from silent to talkies. Just the physical comedy they do in the silent section is undeniably hilarious.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Fair enough.
And Debbie Reynolds is just really fucking cute.
Okay, well, I'm glad it spoke to you. And a lot of people, when I did the research for this list, it was absolutely near the top of just about every one that you can find online. So you're in very, very good company. Unlike my number 3, in fact, 3 and 2 didn't appear much of anywhere on this list. A couple of times, I guess this one did. But I want you to cast your mind back to perhaps before you were born, James, to the mid-90s, and when John Travolta had his renaissance, when Quentin Tarantino had cast him in Pulp Fiction, and then hard on the back of that, he went into a starring role in a movie that was based off a, why have I drawn a blank on his name now? It's a famous Elmer Leonard book. It's Get Shorty from that year.
Yep.
1995, directed by Barry Sonnenfeld. It's John Travolta, Gene Hackman, Rene Russo, Danny DeVito, and then in sort of Dennis Farina, Delroy Lindo, and James Gandolfini in smaller roles. And it's basically about a mobster from Miami who heads over to LA to pitch an idea for a film that he has, and also had to deal with some people out there who hadn't paid their bets. Comes across this dodgy producer Gene Hackman plays named Harry Zim, and he starts to treat the movie business like the mob business, and it's entertaining as all fuck, at least for me back in 1995 and in subsequent viewings ever since.
That's a hard disagree.
Yep. I can hear the note of derision in your voice.
It honestly just bores me. I've never been a fan of John Travolta. He's probably the most punchable actor in Hollywood, at least just his face. This is definitely my favorite performance of his, and that's not difficult considering I hate the shit out of Grease.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, good. DeVito's fun. Is it Nicole Kidman who's the female lead?
Rene Russo,
right. Again, I'm not familiar with her much. I haven't been able to finish 1989's Batman. And I'd love to get around to LA Confidential, but it just never appears for itself. And it's like, oh, there's a lot of films out there.
Oh, sorry, you're mixing her up with Kim Basinger, I think. Kim Basinger is
Motherfucker.
LA Confidential. Yeah.
Okay, well, just Renee Russo exists then.
Yes, look, you've seen her in things, but she's a model turned actor, and this is sort of early in her career, so she's not phenomenal, but she plays her part well. But I really like the directing as well. Like Barry Sonnenfeld sort of had a shtick where he had a lot of wide angle lenses that he would zoom up close to not zoom up, but dolly up close to people, and I love that angle. It sort of really, really speaks to me about cinema, and that's a lot in this particular film, as that's where he shot all his movies this way. But just the attention to detail, some of the quotability of the lines, like there is a line on this film from our soundboard as well, "Fuck you, fuckball," little Harvey Keitel cameo in the film. So
that was great.
It's for me, and I know Wayne enjoys this movie as well, but again, I suspect you have to have been a big moviegoer at the time, and this was right around the time that we made a couple of our dodgy student films as well. So I guess it all sort of combined together to have this real warm place in my heart.
Yes, one of those films that I will hopefully see the light of day.
Jeez, no one needs to see those films, trust me.
Yeah, but I don't know. Get Shorty is one of those films that I can't really have like a negative opinion on, because it's like there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, it just doesn't, and that's fine. I think most people are looking at kind of like the Letterboxd Grays, which is a website where like Goodreads for movies.
Yeah, that's what my list is on right now.
yeah, me too. There's some people who give it 4, and like me, 4 stars out of 5, and there's people giving it 1 star out of 5. So it's quite polarizing.
Really? I don't know. I feel like the script is really well written. To me, it occupies the same reason as Die Hard, where I'm out of the cultural zeitgeist, so it'll never mean as much to me. But I can't speak exactly. But I can't speak ill of the film because I don't have anything technically wrong with it. It's just it didn't draw me in.
That's fair.
Yeah. And my number 3 is, again, showing Emma Softy. It's a movie that, in my multiple asking of people, literally no one mentioned it. It is 2011, the Eddie Redmayne, and I always get her name confused with somebody else, Michelle Williams starring My Week with Marilyn.
Never even heard of this movie.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, Eddie Redmayne stars as the son of a rich family. I forget, but I'm sure he's someone in the power, and says, "I want to make a name for myself in the movie business." So he goes to a movie studio, and just sits in their lobby for like 2 or 3 days until he gets hired as a 3rd assistant director in a Marilyn Monroe starred production. I can't remember the name of it, and ends up dating her for a week.
Okay.
Yes. And Laurence Olivier is played by Kenneth Branagh to fucking hilarious extents. Although it does occupy a bit of an issue for me because a guy like Eddie Redmayne can land Michelle Williams, who's Marilyn fucking Monroe, and then he ends up also dating Emma Watson.
Okay.
And it has like one of the strangest Toby Jones. You know who Toby Jones is, right?
Yes.
Yes. He has an American accent here, and it is so off-putting. I didn't know how to process it. But I wouldn't call it escapism, but there is that sense of romance, like of hopeless romantic in me. The idea that Eddie Redmayne, of all people, can walk onto a set, and the first job he ever gets is as a third assistant director on a big picture starring Marilyn Monroe and Laurence Olivier, and ends up falling in love and dating Marilyn fucking Monroe.
Right. So there's a bit of wish fulfillment going on here, James. Is that what you're saying?
A little bit.
All right.
But at the same time, like the acting is perfect, and it's about a real film, so I feel like it bumps at least a few of these a bit lower. And Michelle Williams, there's 2 people who I will turn you on to. Lindsay Ellis, who talked about this film in a few years old retrospective about Marilyn Monroe in popular media, and I believe Wired, who they had a accent teacher or whatever, and he sort of discussed her evocation rather than an actual. Basically, she acted like Marilyn without becoming Marilyn.
Okay.
Yes, and something about her is. I don't want to reuse my adjectives, but it's really magnetic. It draws you in, and without her, the film would be just useless. Honestly, she carries that movie star quality that Monroe always had.
Yeah, Michelle Williams is someone who seems to have just gotten better with age in terms of her ability. Every film you see her in, she's sort of captivating. Even that film from earlier in the year, All the Money in the World with Marky Mark.
Oh, that was last year, right?
Yeah, sorry, end of last year. Came out here very early this year, and yeah, she steals every scene that she's in, and that's something that she's never going to be nominated for versus some of the other sort of films that she has been around recently and getting a lot of plaudits for, appropriately, I believe.
Yeah. And on top of that, I think she was in I Feel Pretty, and everyone was saying she should get an Oscar nom for that.
Okay, right. I haven't seen that one.
I haven't seen it, and I'm sure the movie's a piece of shit, but people think that she's amazing in it. Yeah, but again, like this is definitely a date night kind of movie.
Sometimes they're the best kinds of films. All right, nice. All right, the second documentary on my list is all the way up here at number 2. I watched it last year for our show on the top 10 documentaries. It was sort of I was put onto it by a couple of the listeners of the show, and geez, I'm glad I did watch it. It's called Raiders: the story of the greatest fan film ever made.
Oh my god! Okay, I haven't seen this yet. I want to see what your reaction is.
As a film student yourself, and hopefully one day working in the industry, this is, speaking of wish fulfillment, this is like every childhood growing up dream I've had of making a movie, including watching, sort of reflecting on our process of making our films represented on screen. So basically, way back in 1982, these 3 11-year-old mates in Mississippi decided to make a shot-for-shot remake of Raiders of the Lost Ark, obviously on a shoestring/zero budget and using just their resources that they had around them at the time. It took them 7 years. So, of course, they're 11 when they start and they're 18 in certain shots. So the continuity is all over the shot. But they filmed every scene but one. And that was the big scene where Indy's fighting the huge German soldier and the plane is doing the spin around. And eventually the soldier gets mincemeat by the propeller. They did all of that. And then this documentary sort of brings them all together and tells their story. And they decide, well, I think they decide they're going to do it. And the documentary starts being made. And then it's about trying to get the money together, which I can't remember what it is, something along the lines that they needed $700,000 at that point. So they did fundraising and all this kind of stuff to bring it all together to this one last scene. And the story of their friendship and the trials and tribulations they go through and how many times they almost killed each other through this process, literally and figuratively. It's just an incredible story. And for anyone who's a film fan, for anyone who's passionate about movies and getting them made, this is, I think, one of the greatest documentaries ever.
It's been on my Netflix queue for a year now, and I can't say much more than that.
Watch it. I'd be very, very interested in your opinion, James, because given what you're doing in life and what you've chosen, the vocation you've chosen to follow. But for me, as a try-hard filmmaker and a big-time critic, I was virtually in tears by this, tears of happiness just for these kids, now adults, coming together to make their dream come true.
Damn. And I do remember that show, and just hearing you guys talk about documentaries. Fuck, it's not life animated, but there was one that both of you championed, and you were just crying utterly about.
The one that I had is probably my number 2 behind this one was Dear Zachary, a letter to
that was it, right?
To a son from his father. Wayne still hasn't seen it. He refuses to watch it because of how harrowing it is. But that is legitimately the saddest, most fucked up documentary you will ever see.
Mm-hmm. Okay, speaking of sad, sorry to go on a side tangent. Have you seen A Monster Calls?
Yep.
Yes. That's the number 1 for me. It's that and then Schindler's List, the 2 saddest fucking movies I've ever seen.
Yeah, I didn't mind Monster Calls. I'm not sure why it didn't speak to me the way that it has you and a lot of people, but I can see how it was effectively, it would have been effective for a lot of people.
Yes. The friend I mentioned earlier who never cries at movies, she cried so much at that. And that's the only movie she ever cried at.
Oh, well, there you go. That is a claim to fame.
It is a fucking heartbreaker. And I always like pointing it out because it's the one movie I share to everyone because I think it is that emotionally resonant. Yeah. Everyone should have a chance to see it.
Nice. All right. Very keen to hear your number 2.
Yes. And speaking of emotionally resonant, which made me want to curl up into a ball and just cry, my number 2 is, wouldn't you guess it, another musical. 1954, starring Judy Garland and James Mason. It is the 30th or whatever fucking version of A Star Is Born.
Right. Again, haven't seen it.
Yes.
Same
Except
reasons as Singing in the Rain.
there are many, many, many interpretations of it, including one that comes out this year that I will look forward to you two
Yes.
seeing, starring Lady Gaga.
Yeah, I wouldn't be holding your breath.
Actually, I actually saw something kind of come out the other day where someone was comparing it to, just comparing it to other films which you think that you have to wait 10 years for something to be a classic. That one was an instant classic. It was that powerful and brilliant and dynamic, and just I am endlessly excited for it now.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Big calls. Big calls.
Yes, and it's the 54 version. I think I know it's different from the new one. I'm not sure how the other versions differentiates, but this version stars James Mason as a very down and out movie star who's trying to recover his career, and then stumbles upon Garland's character, and basically it's a very father daughter ish relationship, helping her move through the industry and sort of get to fame, like establishing a look. It's a really interesting insight into how Hollywood was in the old, like in the classic days. And it's I wouldn't say it's too much of a musical. Only one major number stands out, and it's very cute. But I say father daughter, and then it turned into a romance, so it is a bit confusing for a second there.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yes, but
Alert.
I think that's all, like, I wouldn't say quantified, but it's helped transition a lot easier from James Mason, who was historically a very great actor, and Judy Garland, who my previous knowledge of her before this was Wizard of Oz, which I was never a big fan of.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you just saw it too young. But then A Star is Born, and she just lights up the screen. I need to learn more adjectives in describing movies, but
You're doing great.
I don't know what it is, but she has just a smile and a look in her eyes every time that not only she acts, but she's with James Mason, that just melts your hearts. And there's one just awkward and heartbreaking, the best way possible, scene at the Oscars, about 2/3 the way through the movie, that it was at that point that I realized this is one of the best musicals ever made. And it was on the edge of becoming one of my favorite films ever.
Right.
Garland,
so how often would you, as someone who doesn't rewatch movies that much, how often would you revisit this one?
I'd say at most probably once a year, which is about it's about my level. Yeah, but it's the kind of movie that I think occupies the same area as La La Land, where I wouldn't watch it unless I'm with someone else. But if I'm with someone else, it's all phones, thrown to the wall, shut up and watch. It is that just magnetic and invigorating and just heart-wrenchingly beautiful.
Okay.
Yes.
Speak with great passion about it. All right.
I'm a very passionate person.
I can tell.
Yes. And now that we're at our...
Today.
Oh, wait, did I start or did you start?
I started, so this is number ones.
Right. So, and then recap your top 10.
Okay, so my top 10 kicks off with... I lost my screen. There it is. Shadow of the Vampire from 2000, starring Willem Dafoe. 1992's Man by Dogs, a French film. And New Nightmare, Wes Craven from 1994 at 8. Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back at number 7. Boogie Nights, Paul Thomas Anderson's Opus in number 6 spot. Number 5, The Lost Soul, The Doomed Journey of Richard Stanley's Armed of Dr. Moreau remake. And Tropic Thunder at number 4. Get Shorty at 3. And Raiders, the story of the greatest fan film ever made at number 2. You want to go straight into my number 1?
Go right ahead. Hopefully we have the same one.
Nope, because you've already mentioned my number 1. My number 1 is Me and Earl and
What the
Dying
fuck?
Girl.
Okay, wait. I don't think you've seen my number 1 then.
There is one notable movie about a movie which I've left on my honorable mentions because I hadn't watched it in 20 odd years, and
Oh shit, I think it might be it.
so I just couldn't justify my vague memories of it beating any of these 10 on my list. But let's see. Let's hear your 10
But
through to
Do
it.
you want to talk about your apparently favorite movie about a movie anymore?
No, I think we covered it before. It's incredibly heart wrenching. It's beautifully directed. It's so well acted, and it will gut punch you. It absolutely will. If you walk out of this movie not feeling something, you are dead inside.
I can't disagree with that. Right. So my number, start just going through my list again. My number 10 is the longest movie ever, The Death of Superman Lives What Happened. My number 9 is South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. Definitely a movie about movies. My number 8 is Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. Far too low. My number 7 is Tropic Thunder. My number 6 is La La Land. Number 5, The Artist. Number 4, Singing in the Rain, a classic musical. Number 3, My Week with Marilyn. Number 2, A Star is Born, 1954. And my number 1, which isn't on your list, which is the only film on my list, or that's pretty much guaranteed about a real person, about someone who is so undeniably extravagant and interesting. I am surprised it took so long to make a movie about him, but I'm glad we had the wait. It is Tim Burton's 1994 Ed Wood.
Yep. Okay.
Yep.
That is not the one I was referencing before, but it is on my honorable mention list as well.
I had a heart attack there for a second. Like I said before, La La Land and Me and the Dying Girls are 2 of my all-time favorite films, as well as My Week with Marilyn and Singing in the Rain. Holy shit, I need to control this list. But I have to set a point where true quality beats just favorability. And Ed Wood is just a brilliant film. Johnny Depp, who, again, with my age, I grew up with him as Jack Sparrow and Jack from Corpse Bride. That's about it. And going back and discovering his older work, it's incredibly revealing and interesting. I sort of started with my What's Eating Gilbert Grape, and that was eye-opening. And then I just stumble onto Ed Wood. I am on a car ride to a USC Trojans football game. I'm about halfway through, and I do not touch food or go to the game for an hour and a half to finish the film.
Wow.
It is just, again, Ed Wood himself, as Edward D. Wood Jr., I believe, is such a fucking interesting character.
No doubt.
Yes. And something I talked about, since we brought it up before in documentaries, that I think works really well here, is there is never a sense of bias. They present Wood to you as he was and doesn't ask you to make an assumption. They present him as this very eccentric character, and that can come off very badly. But Depp just rolls with every single punch thrown to him. And it is just a magnificent piece of work. Not just the film, but especially the script. But I can't talk about him forever. Because Jesus Christ, Martin Landau.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
I can't wait to hear your words after I'm done just ranting and gallivanting about this.
No. Look, my memory's not that strong this movie. I've watched it once back when it first came out. I enjoyed it, but not having the passion for making of films, at least I say passion for film. But it was like, yeah, good film. Enjoyed it. Well done, everybody. Johnny Depp was incredible. And it was a chancy film back in that time. What did you just say it was again? It's 97?
94.
94. So, yeah, 24 years ago, again, to make a black and white film, wide release, mainstream film. Tim Burton was, back in those days, the chances he was taking were generally very, very good. So, in this case, I totally agree on that sense. But it doesn't speak to me the way it speaks to you, which is why it's not on my list, but it is your number one of the greatest films ever made.
What I think is interesting is just going off of, say, my number 10. I think Burton was just on a failure streak because he did Batman Forever, and that which didn't flop, but it underperformed because it didn't have toy sales as highly. And then Ed Wood, which just didn't make a lot of money because of the film it was. And that's
Did
did
he do Batman Forever as well? I thought he gave up the ghost.
Oh no! I meant Batman Returns.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Joel Schumacher did both of those shitty ones.
Yeah.
Yes, because I do want to get into honorable mention because I'm interested to see what you have.
Sure.
Martin Landau as shit. Oh my god.
Oh, he's playing that Bela Lugosi.
Yes, right.
Yep.
Martin Landau's Bela Lugosi. Thankfully he did win the Oscar, and I think this is his final performance. And what a fucking home run to end on. Other than a couple notes about the cursing I've seen from from his daughter, I believe, following the film, just he is pitch perfect. He brings a lot of depth to a character who you initially think is just sad and washed up, but he has such a joy working with Wood that as myself an actor, I can't imagine being able to replicate.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, how do I describe it? It's like a candle in the darkness, and just out of nowhere, a match hit his wick, and you can see you see him light up every time he steps on the set with him, and even in a scene where he's wrestling like a foam octopus tentacle, just he has an utter sense of joy that's hard to fathom that kind of man having. And I could honestly talk about this film for a long time because it is honestly just a technically perfect, amazing film.
I'm so pleased that you enjoyed it so much. I wish I could contribute more, but like I said, my memory is sketchy, so I'm just going to go with you and defer and say it must be a good choice.
Yes. You could include it in your marathon with Singing in the Rain.
And A Star is Born, right?
Yeah. You can wait for the new version.
Okay.
I mean, 1994 was a great year for underrated films, because especially for someone like me, I fucking love Quiz Show and no one ever talks about it.
It's 1994 is often sort of thrown out there as one of the best years in movies, I reckon.
Yes, but then it also has Forrest Gump, which I know you are a fervent hater for.
Yeah, don't get me started on Forrest Gump. That's a discussion for another podcast.
I should have included that just to piss you off.
Is there a movie in that movie? Anyway.
I mean, I think they were filming at Vietnam, so it can sort of count.
Okay.
Right.
God you didn't. Thank God you didn't. All right, so honourable mentions?
Yes.
So yes, Ed Wood was my sort of fifth honourable mention. The Player was the one I was talking about. Robert Altman's The Player, which is sort of a very stark list of, or look at Hollywood and how down and dirty it can be. The Muppet Movie from back in 1979. And then sticking with the kids' films, Who Framed Roger Rabbit as well, but I didn't think either of those two were enough about movies to sneak on the list. Another one that I had the hardest time cutting, which is kind of out of left field, is Electric Boogaloo, The Wild Untold Story of Canon Films. There's another documentary. I didn't want to have three documentaries on my list. Canon Films predates you I believe. It was sort of through the 80s, and I think wound up in the early 90s or 89, I can't remember which. And it was just this reckless kind of cowboy, to use that term, a film production studio, which would just, for example, mock up a poster, take that to places and say, here, finance our movie, which has already been made, like basically help us get distribution. And then they would take that money and make the movie. So they would just bent the rules left, right, and center, would somehow end up making some pretty big films, like Master of the Universe was a Golden Globus production, and it's just, and that's Canon Films. It's such a fascinating fly on the wall look at the way Hollywood worked and just how ridiculous this should never have gotten off the ground, these two guys, and yet for a while they were absolutely not dominating the whole industry, but making a real name for themselves before it all eventually catches up with them and goes bust.
Shit. Okay, yeah. You mentioned a few that were on my list of ones I wanted to see. There was also Bowfinger, State and Maine, and Inland Empire.
I haven't seen State and Maine or Inland Empire. Bowfinger was not bad for what it was, and probably a lot cleverer than I gave it credit for when I just watched it as a straight comedy all those years ago.
Yeah, I really wish I could have run to The Player, because I haven't seen anything from Altman, and he's really interesting to me. So I really hope I can get to it eventually.
Yeah, I think it's, again, from memory, it's well worth a watch. It's probably something I should return to watch now, knowing a lot more about how things work and than I did sort of just watching it as a relatively young person back when it sort of came out.
And I've honorable mentions, which I'm surprised didn't come up for you. Two of the classic ones were Sunset Boulevard and Cinema Paradiso.
Yeah, I don't know if I've even seen Sunset Boulevard and Cinema Paradiso. Again, if I watched it, my vague memories of it was on, but I wasn't watching it. So that's certainly something I can rectify.
I felt like Sunset Boulevard would have been in like your top three. I feel like it was your style.
Sorry, not meaning
Yeah.
to disappoint.
And then there's I have 3 more modern ones because that's more of what what I can do. There's Super 8, which I wasn't huge on, but it's just enough to earn an honorable mention.
Yeah, I agree. Same thing. I thought about it. Yeah, it's memorable in the sense that it was, J.J. Abrams, and it was kind of like the E.T. of the new generation. But I didn't think it was as good as I'd hoped it would be. So that's why I didn't make
Yeah.
the list.
And that's what I didn't get around to it till like 6 years after it came out, so I did have time for the hype to build up, especially with JJ working on so much. It was also a bit let down, but I think the childish joy to it really sort of brought it forth.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then there's a movie that, again, I'm surprised no one mentioned, I don't think, Saving Mr. Banks from 2013.
Never seen it.
Oh. I keep
It's all about Disney.
yes, it's about
Mary Poppins author.
yeah. The author of Mary Poppins, she's going to Disney and basically has given up as like multiple attempts of trying to get secure rights. She's just fine, but only if I help make it. And Emma, or whatever her name was,
Emma Thompson.
Emma Thompson. Yes, God, I don't know what it is about her, but she plays a character very lived in, and you could feel there's flashbacks in it, sort of tying back to her childhood, which goes in a message later in the film. But it's just this very deep and resonant character that, again, I will plug Lindsay Ellis because I think she's a genius in the videos she makes. Covered that movie in 30 minutes, and every single word she said just talks about it brilliantly that I couldn't do any justice to. Although I think that the casting of Tom Hanks as a more jaded Walt Disney, probably the most truthful depiction we've gotten of him so far.
All right, that sounds more interesting than I gave it credit for.
Yes, and a movie I would be interested to hear your opinion on. Last year's Briggs v. Bear.
Oh, okay. This is the one with Jared. What's his last name? Nope, can't think of it off the top of my head. Sorry, the guy
I can
from.
tell you right now, it's also not a Jared.
It's not a Jared. Sorry. Oh, what's his name? The guy from Napoleon Dynamite.
No.
No. Oh, all right. So I've got the wrong person in mind. What's it about?
It stars Kyle Mooney from SNL. It's gonna be a little bit of a roller coaster. It is about a man who was kidnapped as a child and kept in an underground shelter by his new parents, one of them being Mark Hamill. And to instill the values they want in their son, they create a very acid trippy sci-fi television show starring a character named Briggs v. Bear.
Oh, okay, right.
Yes, and eventually he is broken out. But rather than taking him on the very typical, oh, this guy's insane, so we need to treat him storyline, he carries this immense sense of optimism, and he's like, the show never ended. Like, where is it? Because no one else has heard of it. So basically, by uploading the clips of the show that he stuck out with him before the place was raided, he secures funding to make a full feature finale of the series. And the movie is honestly, from pitch alone, it's insane. But Kyle Mooney is just an optimistic bundle of like, he's like a puppy. He walks up to everyone and is instantly friendly, has no idea what's going on. And the fish out of water narrative, which can normally feel really awkward, his sense of joy just really pushes the film forward. And without him, it would not be good, honestly. But by making that character so full-bodied, I guess is the correct term, really puts it through. And again, Mark Hamill was
choice. Okay.
It's amazing, yeah, and it has some really out there things within the TV show. I'd say, if anything, it would be like a bros night for you and Wayne. Just it's like after done recording, oh shit, look at that, we're snowed in, better put on a movie,
Okay.
and just watch that, and you're taken on a mental journey.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah.
Well, no, it sounds okay, and I should probably give it a bash. Would you say yes, it's worth watching then?
I mean, there are 4 other movies that I think you should put above it.
Yeah, okay. So
Yes.
it's not high
But-
on the list. Fair enough.
It's honest. It's a film that if you're there, you want to sit down, you want to have something that's not too intense, maybe something to put on while your daughter or girlfriend are with you. It's a really pleasing film.
All right, sounds quite reasonable to me.
Yes. Right. And that is it for the episode. I would like to thank you so much for hopping onto a show which primary source material you know pretty much nothing about.
Oh, thank you for the invitation, James.
Yes.
The lure was getting to talk to a listener of our show who's such a great contributor and interactor, and it's been a lot of fun to talk about a topic we've never done before. And yeah, I hope that to listen to your passion about films, I hope that your career in the industry really takes off once you're done with your studies.
Oh, yes. And hopefully by the time you guys probably get around to using this topic on your show as well, you include some musicals because you really need them.
Apparently musicals and movies about movies go hand in hand. Who'd have thunk it?
Yes, pretentious studio heads want to make more movies about movies. How do we fix that? Just put some music in it.
Yeah. And we also know that movies about movies tend to do quite well. Not the ones I've picked here today, but the majority of them tend to do quite well with the Academy voters, at least in the past, because there's nothing that actors like more than seeing subject matter about themselves. So
yes. Hollywood is just one giant proverbial, or maybe not proverbial, hand job to themselves. So it just makes sense.
It does indeed.
Yes. And what we like to do before we sign off is tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, we can basically find, if you search the Countdown Movie and TV Reviews, you'll find us on Podbeans, where we host our show, and we're on Twitter at the Countdown PC if you want to communicate more directly. And we're on Facebook as well. And then we have a listener community. Facebook page is /the Countdown from memory. But if you search for it there, it will come up straight away. And that's pretty much the major ways. Yeah.
Yes, I'll be sure to plug that in the description. Hopefully, I'll remember. And like I said, you can find them anywhere. And if this guest appearance didn't convince you to check out their other material, I don't know what will.
Well, we're a lot. If you're looking for a lot more bad language and incredulity at each other's picks and throwing shade, basically. So, I'm a guest and James is a nice guy, so we were very respectful today. My co-host and I, less so.
Yes. If you want something that is not so well thought out and with less ums and likes and more just vulgar terms, go watch them. They are an utter joy. You guys already know very well what my feelings are on you. I think I said that right. So, and I honestly can't say enough.
Thank you so much, man. It means a real great deal. I think I said that to you privately, and I'll say it now publicly as well. You and people like your good self are the reason that the show has continued on so long, and thankfully showing no signs of slowing down.
Yes. I think that's everything we have to say for today. Okay, so one final question I want to ask you is, for this Schmodown, what they do is they come up with personalities. So, Mr. Paul, taking in mind this is very much like wrestling, what would your name be for the Schmodown?
Ooh, I would be, I don't know, maybe I could riff off my day job and be something like the head shrinker, something like that.
So you would just go in and just point like a weird sci-fi gun at people.
or I just derail them completely by pointing out their inadequacies with a quick verbal stoush before a bout, and then take them to task from there. So
you're not looking for like a physical success, but more of like a mental degradation to sort of make them stop wanting to win.
That's it. Like, just to doubt themselves a bit more.
God, that is terrifying. Yeah, I think I said it already, but thank you so much for being on the show. We'd love to have you back. And
anytime, man. Let me know.
Yes, and hopefully next time we will pick movies that we've both seen.
We'll get a topic that has more crossover, so we can get more angry at each other.
Yes. I believe after this we'll be heading back to our host, who will be tagging their personal social media. But for me and Paul, goodbye.
Cheers.